Well, it's good to have you here.
Thank you. Actually, I just got sent another podcast that is kind of...
Let's comment on that after we're done. I just saw it. When I was waiting for you, I got to watch it on a fast speed. So I think we should talk about that afterwards. But let's just introduce you to the audience. So this is Jodie Engle, who was supposed to be with us, with Boston and I and Stephanie on our original podcast, which was based around the passing of Alina in Europe. And sort of the podcast was about Shelby STARNES, his coaching, and Jodie was one of the people that was coached by Shelby. So I'm very excited to have you here. Last time it was difficult to get Jodie on because it was late at night. Boston is nocturnal and Jodie is suffering with heart issues, so it's difficult for her to stay up late, right?
Yeah, and so there was something said in that podcast that it wasn't totally true. I've been working, just sparingly, not my norm. Like, my job has been very, very lenient with me. I'm a finance manager.
Wait, are you talking about
a career? Are
you talking about the podcast with 3 people in it?
It was cutting out really bad. I'm going to try to disconnect.
I got you back. You're back.
All right. I just disconnected from Wi-Fi to see if that would help anything. You kept freezing up on my screen.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Is it better now?
Yeah.
So are you talking about the podcast with 3 people in it? It's called the Think Big Bodybuilding?
Yeah, I saw that one.
Let's talk about that right after.
But I was talking about where in your all's podcast, Stephanie had said that, I hadn't been working. I have been. It's just been very sparingly. It hasn't been my norm, but also I couldn't come on because I'm a single mom. I had to get my kiddo up early for school. I wanted to be on it, but I was passed out.
Okay, yeah, of course. Well, let's start from the beginning. Where are you from?
I'm from Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, you were born there and you still live there, huh?
Yep.
Must be a nice state. I've always wanted to visit Kentucky, but I haven't had the opportunity to.
It's okay. My family is what keeps me here. I travel. I've been a bunch of different places. I won't be here forever, but if you like really slow paced, you'll love it.
I like places that feel like they're the heartland of America.
You'd love Louisville, Kentucky then.
There's a lot of dip there. People use a lot of dip there. That's what I hear.
Oh, they do. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that. So how did you get into weightlifting? And I don't actually know which division you competed in, by the way. I don't know if are you in figure or in physique or...
I am women's physique. Okay. I started competing in 2017, but before I ever was a competitor, I grew up in athletics, played varsity sports through high school. I had my son at a very young age. I was 18. And then I kind of let myself go. I was over 330 pounds by the end of letting myself go. Yeah. Oh. And I ended up going through a major weight loss transformation. No bariatric surgeries or anything. Just took my health back into my own hands and got healthy. So by the end of that, I lost 157 pounds, I believe it was, in 11 months. Wow. And then I was a runner. And so I was just running and I loved it. But I met a guy who was a bodybuilder, and he just told me, he's like, why don't you just try this? And I'm like, no. I'm like, I've been judged my whole life because I've been fat, what do I look like getting up on a stage for me to be judged half naked? Mm-hmm. And so he wore me down. So I did my first prep in 2016. And it was after I was cleared medically because I had a tummy tuck from where I'd lost all that weight. I had gotten skin removal surgery, and I prepped, and thinking back now, I think I might have taken 10 milligrams of Anabar, for my very first prep, and it wasn't long. I mean, it was very, very minimal. And I was not with Shelby then. This was a local coach that I was with, and I came in third at my first show, and I just got the bug. I just loved it. I never thought I would love standing on a stage as much as I did, but I loved it. And so 2018, I set a goal to go back to that same show where I came in third, and I wanted to win the overall. I'm like, no, I want to win. So that next year in 18, we did a show prior to the original show, Plan in Mind. I won the overall at that first show, my class in the overall, and then I went back to that original show and I won my class in the overall as well. So, which then put me into 19 for nationals. So, went to nationals the following year. I came in third in Chicago. That was June, and then kind of made a decision to go a different route with coaching at that point. I'd left the coach that had been with me from 17 on, and I tried a new direction, and I ended up competing. It was like 5 or 6 weeks later under a new coach at USA's in Vegas, and I came in 5th, top 5.
What year was that? So, your audio is pretty clear. The video's cutting out a little bit, but I missed the year. So which year was that when you switched coaches?
So I switched coaches in 2019. Okay. After junior nationals, going into USA's in Vegas.
Okay, fantastic.
And so still wasn't with Shelby at that point. I had inquired with Shelby, but at that point I could not. I was just like, oh my God, that's so much money. Like I couldn't swallow it yet. I just wasn't ready. So told him he was worth every penny because he's been the coach I wanted to work with for years. But I just had to monetarily make it make sense to me. And so then fast forward to 2020, COVID, right? I had full plans to go back to junior nationals, and I set a goal. I want to win that show. I want to earn my pro card at that show. So I started prep January 1, 2020, under Justin Compton was my coach at that point. I still hadn't hired Shelby. And we were chugging right along, but then of course, as you know, a pandemic hits and show after show after show kept getting canceled. And I'm like, well, you know what? I'm already in prep. Like, I'm just going to continue prepping, where all my friends were pulling out and they're like, there's always the next year. I'm an extremist. I love the discipline behind prepping, the meals at specific times, turning on autopilot and just following a plan. I love that. So I didn't stop prepping, and I ended up hiring Shelby it was right at 12 weeks out, because my current coach, he and I are still very close friends to this day. He ended up with some medical issues, and he didn't ghost me. He was just medically unable to get with me, and we hadn't checked in about a month. And I'm coming up on 12 weeks out from nationals at this point, because then I set it for the last show that I could get it at. I'm like, surely to God they won't cancel that show. So I then hired Shelby and sent him the plan that I was currently on, gear protocol, food, all of it. And we started from there. And very, very attentive, probably one of the most quick responding coaches I've ever experienced in my life. I mean, if I was sending a check-in at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., I'm getting a response back by 5:03 or 5:04, quick. And so I wasn't used to that. And so I was like, wow, this is great. And so fast forward a little bit, I think my issues kind of started, I started popping random fevers at work, because per COVID guidelines at work and whatnot, we would have to check temps and everything like that. And all of a sudden I was popping fevers. And I'm like, what the hell is this, I mean, I've been prepping for so long. I'm like, I'm supposed to feel like shit right now. I have prepped all year. So, but I
got to ask you a question. When you said you were prepping all year, were you taking Clenbuterol or T3 during that time?
So, really, with Justin, for instance, yes, we were on Clen, we were not on T3. But then once another show got canceled, he would put it back. He's like, okay, if we're going to stay in prep, we're going to have to come off of this, not necessarily rebound, but we're going to kind of hold steady here, and then we'll pump the gas later. Was more of that plan. So that entire time, no, I was not on Clen or T3 all throughout the year. I mean, there were times when shows were getting close, I was on it, and then they'd get canceled, and then we'd take right off of it. T3 never came into play until I believe it was about 8 or 9 weeks out with Shelbs. So,
okay. How many weeks would you estimate you were on Clen during that year? Before talking to Shelby.
Justin is not very big on starting Clen immediately. I might have been on Clenbuterol 8 weeks max, absolute max. And like my dosage on Clen never got above 60 micrograms. So very, very mild.
Okay, I'm just asking for the audience to understand, because T3 and Clen directly raise the heart rate, and that was
100%.
what I was most shocked by in the previous discussion. So I just wanted to see if there was a lot of background use of it. And can I ask you one more question? Did Shelby know that you were once overweight, and also how long were you overweight for?
So, trying to think. I met her when I was 18. 4.5, 5 years.
Okay.
I just got like bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. I mean, obviously women gain weight during pregnancy, and I definitely did. But after I had my son, honestly, I let myself go.
Okay.
Completely. But so I did take Clen throughout the year, but it got above 60 micrograms and only got 40. Just because we weren't sure how these shows were going to pan out. And so by the time Justin ended up kind of medically sick, won't put his specifics out there, but I contacted Shelby, and what I felt was going to be like a rush prep. Because of course, in an athlete's mind, we are never, oh God, I'm so far away from the goal. I didn't feel like I looked how I should at 12 weeks out. And so I reached out to him and asked him, what would it take for you to be able to down me in? Like, I want to be like my end goal is to be a top level pro one day. Do you think I have the potential? And this is the show I really have my heart set on. And he was like, oh, we can totally get there. And he's like, I would love to work with you. And me hearing that from like my dream coach, right? I'm like, oh my God. So it was super exciting. Shelby was great. And when I started popping fevers, like there was nothing that I didn't leave out to Shelby in my check-ins. Like if there are clients that are like oversharing, I'm that client. Like if I hadn't had a bowel movement in 3 or 4 days, I'm telling my coach, like anything's off. So anytime I wasn't feeling good, or if visibly he could see it in my pictures, there were plenty of days where he was like, hey, we're just not going to do any cardio tonight. Like once you're done training, I prefer you to go home and go to bed. Because my lifestyle, I work 12 to 14 hours a day as a finance manager in the automotive industry. And then I'm training, and then I'm getting home, meal prepping, shower. There wasn't a lot of time for recovery there, And so there were days he would just be like, hey, no cardio. He realized like what carbohydrates, and as far as like metabolically, I'd never experienced it before. I'd never been fed this much into a show. And he fed me. There were a lot of posts, obviously a lot of women have come out being like, I've been starved. Like that was not my experience. This was the most food I was ever fed in the show. So it was nice, but I will say that there were a couple of times when I voiced like, maybe they didn't come off as concerns, but they were concerns within my head. And I would be like, hey, this morning at work, I just got sent to get another COVID test because I had 102.8 fever. Like I feel like shit, And it would be like, okay, take cardio off, still push as hard as you can in the gym, and like we'll check in first thing in the morning to see how you're feeling. Let me know if you're 100%. At that time, I'm like, great, I don't have to do cardio, and the next day I would look better. The body's just taxed, and then leading into the show. I got my diuretic protocol. I don't have it pulled up right in front of me. I remember it, but I saw the diuretic protocol 10 days out, and it almost made me like watching some of that podcast that we'll touch on later. Honestly, made me not even want to talk about it, just because it was how that came to me was almost as if I just made it up or it never happened. And
so Jodie, I have to interrupt you because For the last 10, 15 minutes, the video has been cutting on and off, but the audio is cutting really a lot, to the point where I can't decipher what you're saying sometimes. I'm afraid that the audience won't. Your story is very important to me, and I'm afraid that the audience won't hear you properly. And I know, just for the audience to know, Jodie's in bed, so she can't really move around too much. I don't know how we could. Maybe can you try to speak again? Let's see if it got a bit better. Oh, now it's cut completely. Oh, that's unfortunate. Oh, it's much better.
Okay.
Much better. Yeah. Okay.
I tried reconnecting to my Wi-Fi after the router's down here. I reset it.
It turns out it's better with the Wi-Fi. Okay, thank you. This is okay. I just wanted to make sure we get your story. So you were saying about the diuretic protocol. You said after you heard the other people share it, you were thinking of what?
It almost made me not want to come on here, just because, I don't know. It just kind of made me feel like that for me to even talk about it, like I shouldn't have talked about it. I should have just kept it quiet. And I just want to let it be known, my reasoning behind ever speaking on what I took was never to defame or scrutinize or criticize Shelby, because I still speak with Shelby. Shelby just checked in with me when I was at the hospital, and he knows, I don't hold him 100% accountable for what happened to me. I own my part in it. There were, and again, I'm not a coach. I help people, but I will never say that I'm a coach. I knew better than to do what my piece of paper said, and I voiced that to someone.
Which year was this when it happened? When you were 2020?
2020, yeah.
And what was the? I think I know what you're responding to. That damn other podcast. One gentleman said something very offensive to me, even just because he was saying the person's only been bodybuilding for 3. I didn't know who he was talking about. I don't know if it's you. The person who's only been bodybuilding for 3.5 years, and they're a coach, and then they follow the protocol, though it's crazy, and get a pro card, and then they complain. Were they talking about you?
That's what I felt like, but I never claimed to be a coach.
Yeah,
I help people bring in for shows, but I do not. I don't need to coach. I'm very, very successful in my career. Coaching's not anything I want to do. I like being a client. Yeah. So I'm not sure if that was directed toward me or if they were given misinformation. But yeah, I started bodybuilding in 17. I've never claimed to know all. I know enough to get me by, but that's why I hired who I hired.
Everybody on that podcast, by the way, except the gentleman who heads it, I don't know his name, the one that was on the left side, everybody else made mistakes. For example, we'll go through them afterwards. But for them to say that somebody else that, even if they were a coach, should understand the ramifications of what they're doing on their heart is ridiculous, because even those two people speaking were making mistakes with things. And bodybuilding coaches, maybe they know a lot about drugs, but that doesn't mean they know a lot about organ health. And how this is your anyway. So
I think that's why I just wanted to speak on it, because I spoke with Stephanie on it, because throughout my I had rhabdo after my show. I had a major shoulder surgery, and throughout these things, if you look on my Instagram, you can kind of see the I say progression, but really it's the opposite of what my health has done post show. In my posts or in my stories. I'm not somebody that puts my stuff out there like that, but you can see posts where, oh shit, Jodie just went in for shoulder surgery today. Or, okay, cool, Jodie made a good post, her creatinine levels looked better. I keep people up to date with what's going on, but I don't just paint a picture of my life. I'm somewhat private. But
what was the diuretic protocol? Even though we're not focusing on that, but what was it? I mean, not specifically. You said it's a few days. It was a few days of.
It was a 10-day long protocol. It started at 10 days out, starting with Aldactone. So I didn't have the same protocol that Stephanie had, where hers said Bumex in there. I did not have Bumex incorporated. So mine was
Aldactone then Dyazide.
Yep, and then that was, I think, for the first 2 days just AM. And then after that, so day 3, I believe, it was 25 milligrams AM and PM, so 50 milligrams total. That was day 3. Day 4 was the same. So 25 and 25. Following day, it was 50 and 50. And it ramped up leading into the show. And now so I'm trying to remember the dates exactly. So I competed, prejudging was on a Friday and finals were Saturday. Dyazide was incorporated Thursday night. So night before prejudging. And water was cut earlier than we anticipated. Like, again, there wasn't a set in stone plan. It was a tentative plan that was sent to me that was subject to change as my check-ins came in. And so I led into the show. I misspoke when I was on my live. I said I was drinking right at 3 gallons of water going into the show. And then went from that to, it was 3:30-ish in the day. My water got cut and I wasn't expecting it. And I still had an Aldactone to take and a Dyazide to take. And that was Thursday. And so I'm like, oh crap, like I'm thirsty. And so, I mean, I'm still eating every 2 hours, like trying to fill me out. Like I was flat, go figure. But so yes, obviously I was thirsty. I got like 2 ounces of black coffee here and there, but all that does is dehydrate you further. I took my Dyazide, and then I didn't sleep worth a shit the night before the show. And
what was the Clenbuterol and T3 like?
So Clen got as high as.
And how long was it used? More importantly.
Well, we started using Clen. Like my Clen dose got upped the moment, like my first check-in, like 12 weeks out.
Okay. Okay,
and then
so you were using an adrenaline agonist, which for the audience to know, that speeds up the heart rate. Just for the audience to also know, adrenaline is one of the reasons, high adrenaline levels, that people have heart problems later in life. It's believed that anabolic steroids increase left ventricular hypertrophy via increasing adrenaline levels, not directly through the androgen. So when you take an adrenaline agonist like Clenbuterol, you speed up your heart rate acutely. You didn't have, you weren't told to measure your heart rate or anything, resting heart rate. So you had no idea really what was going on there. And then the T3?
The T3 came in, I believe I would say maybe 9 weeks out. And we started moderately, like 25 micrograms. Okay. And now that ramped up quickly, but we started at that 25.
What was the max?
It got, I think the highest it got was one. I would really like to go back through my emails. I'm gonna lowball it and say 125.
Wow, if I took that, Jodie, my heart rate would be like 130 resting. It would be like 120. I can barely tolerate.
That's what I'm going through. Well, the thing is, I mean, my heart rate was constant. This was the only prep I'd ever been through. Normally, coaches that I'd had in the past had removed Clenbuterol at like 2 to 4 days out. And we didn't. This was the first show I've ever done where I stepped on stage while taking 120 micrograms of Clenbuterol that morning.
Wow, that's a fascinating.
Yeah, ran right through. It was a first. So I was like, okay, this is new, but again, I'm going to go with it. Like I told him, like, I want to go pro. Like if this is what it takes, I'm here for it, And so in those moments, a lot of people are like, oh, the athlete has to take accountability. And I am.
Because let's be clear though. How many athletes really know that T3 directly raises their heart rate? Many don't even realize that at all.
Right. I mean, we know that Clenbuterol does, but we just, a lot of times, a lot of us are on so many compounds. At that point, we're not sure which one's causing which
effect,
body part organ to do what. We just know we're taking a boatload of shit and we look insane. And I mean, in all honesty, before the diuretics, I look back on my pictures, like we can't ever predict who's going to show up at shows, but I could have won that show stepping on stage at 4 weeks out.
Oh, really? And
yeah. So a lot of folks are like, oh, well, if you're not conditioned, then that's why your coach gave you this protocol. Like, maybe in an Olympian standpoint, no, I wasn't that level, but this was the best package I had ever brought. This was the most insane look I had ever even seen on myself. And so, and Shelby the whole time was very confident. He's like, no, he's like, this is working perfectly. He's like, and so I just trusted it, but so my water got cut Thursday mid-afternoon. And still eating every couple of hours, checking in multiple times, Skype calls, or Instagram video calls for him to look at me. And he's like, it's working perfect, like no changes needed. Take your half Dyazide before bed. And then the following morning, I might have slept an hour. I felt so crappy. Then the following morning, it was like pancakes with syrup and butter and just trying to get me to fill out. And then I'm trying to remember if I took the other half of that Dyazide. I think that I did. The other diuretic, again, I had 5 ounces of black coffee upon waking up. And then that was it for fluids until I got backstage. So I was up from 3:30. I wasn't backstage ready to go on until after 10 a.m. And so laying back there 25 minutes before it was time to go on stage. So as I'm pumping up, I was told to drink 5 ounces of V8 juice. And so I had that in a bag backstage. I'd actually completely forgotten about the V8 juice until a girl that was backstage at Nationals was like, I will never forget you and your bag of V8 juice. Because I just had a Ziploc bag full of this red shit. And everybody's like, what is that? I'm like, I don't know. It's V8 juice. I've never had it before. So used that to pump up. Disgusting. I go out. I held center the whole time. Never moved us. And then we walk off. And immediately, I'm trying to get a hold of Shelby. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, did this just really happen? And then he was like, okay, 8 ounces of water immediately. 8 ounces of water is a shot. I was utterly disappointed in how much water 8 ounces was.
I have no idea what it looks like.
Yeah. And then he's like, withhold fluids until I say, And so after that water, I'd actually messaged him and I'm like, hey, question, because I immediately had a photo shoot post-show. And so I'm going and I'm posing and I'm sweating. And that was the most vascular, like I had looked, the best I'd looked. And I asked, I'm like, why do you think that is? Like, because I look totally different with water in my system. And he made the comment back to me that, hey, we're going to incorporate water for finals. Like that is a better look. So perfect. So I'm like, cool. Didn't happen. So I went from 10:50, let's just say 11 a.m. Thursday, all the way through Friday. When I got off stage at 11 a.m. until Saturday at 7:30, 8 o'clock, no water.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I didn't question it, because I had mentioned it already. Like, hey, I looked really good after drinking. Like, even I could see it, and I don't see my body. Like, I don't notice things. And, but it just never happened. And so I was like, okay, no big deal. Obviously I got what I wanted. I won my pro card. It was fantastic. Like, and I can't say that I don't have any regrets. Like if I could go back and do it all differently, I totally would. I'd give my pro card back in a heartbeat to have one normal day of what felt like living in my own body. But again, I'm not angry with Shelby. But a couple to 3 weeks after my show is when it first started, like to the point of, okay, I need to get to a hospital. My lower back was hurting me so bad. And I was only up in that 2 to 3 weeks time. I don't even think I'd gone up 2 pounds from the stage. I was following my reverse perfectly because the following day after I won in Orlando, I immediately paid for another 3 months to be able to get that plan quickly and get the ball rolling to reverse to then do a pro show in 2021. Followed it to a T, but I was noticing that like that look that I had, obviously I hadn't gone up much weight, but it was a lot softer of a look. And I'm like, this is weird, but I knew I felt bad because I immediately went back to work when I got home. I'm a single parent. We don't just, hey, we're going to gallivant for a month off. No. So, and my check-ins were fine. He's like, still holding really good shape. Check in again in however many days. But then there was just one day, man, I was sitting, laying, nothing I could do would alleviate this sharp pain in my low back. It felt like a back pump, but a knife was stuck into it. And I drink 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of water a day. And I'm like, it dawns on me. I'm like, I haven't peed today.
Oh.
Didn't think about it. No. And I immediately called my family. I have a good support system, you know, and I'm like, hey, could one of you all come get David? That's my son's name. I think I'm going to go get checked out. I'm just not feeling very well. I don't like to set off alarms and freak anyone out. So I immediately went to the emergency room. And once I got there, as soon as I walked in, but they literally put me in a wheelchair and wheeled me right back. Didn't even have me fill out paperwork. They said that my skin tone, like underneath my eyes, I was jaundice. And that's why they took me back. And my mom told me for days that my skin tone looked off.
So just for the audience to know that usually the skin tone goes off when the liver is under stress, but you were feeling sharp pains in your kidneys.
Yes.
Which is not even what we came to talk about. We came to talk about the heart. I didn't even know about all this. This is shocking.
Yeah. So I started out with rhabdo. I had rhabdo.
Okay.
And we figured that the rhabdo had come from, I had a pretty severe shoulder injury that I prepped on.
Yeah.
And that's what I just put it in my head. That's where it came from. And it turns out it's not, but I got my shoulder fixed about 6-7 weeks after my rhabdo, and creatinine levels had slowly started coming down. Like it was looking like things might be on the up and up. And I was like, okay, cool. Like,
wait, when you went to the emergency room, they diagnosed you with rhabdo?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, I'm following.
Yeah. That was University of Louisville Hospital. And so kept me. And then once I got home, I was on bed rest. Like, you're not going to work. You're obviously not going to the gym. And I listened because I've always been an extremist, but now I'm like, okay, this crap is serious. Like I really gotta let off the gas. And I did. And it sucked. It was hard. But the moment, so after my shoulder surgery, that my surgeon was like, hey, okay, I think your shoulder is to a point now. Obviously, don't go trying to overhead press 90-pound dumbbells, but you can start getting back to a point where you can go to the gym. Then I have my lab work done because I get my labs every 30 days religiously now. Ever since this kidney stuff, because we check CK levels, we check creatinine levels, we check BUN, we check all that now. And like, now I know what it means. And so my creatinine was still a little bit high, but substantially lower than it had been. So I'm like, hell yeah, we're on the mend. Like, we're going to get back. Well, so I started training, but I noticed during my training, and again, I'm not taking any Clenbuterol. I have not taken an oral, like a Clen or a T3 or Anavar or anything like that. No oral steroids since my show at the end of November. Haven't touched anything. I have stayed on, I tapered way off. I'm on 50 milligrams of testosterone, and that's what I've stayed on, just have. And that is through my sponsor, their hormone replacement therapy clinic. It's a prescription and all that. And, but I noticed during my workouts that my breathing and my heart rate was getting so high. And I even got to a point, I'm like, maybe like the caffeine in my pre-workout's just bugging me or something. So I cut out all pre-workout. Yeah. I quit drinking coffee. I was like, okay, let's just eliminate anything that could make my heart rate stupid high really fast. Yeah. But it got to the point as
Were you measuring your heart rate by this point?
Yeah.
Or okay, how high was it getting in the workouts?
During the workouts, it was in the 180s.
Yeah, that's been happening to me after COVID. Yeah. It's very, very scary. Yeah.
And that wasn't normal for me because before my prep, my resting heart rate might be in the 70s, maybe. And I've never had blood pressure issues. And so now I was put on Lisinopril because after rhabdo, we started noticing my blood pressure was running a lot higher than normal.
Just for the audience to know, that's an ACE inhibitor blood pressure medication.
Yeah. And so I've been on Lisinopril for a while now, and it seemed to help, but I could not, one, my heart rate was getting so high during workouts. Two, I'm having to take 5 and 6 minutes rest between sets because I am not leaned over panting, but having to walk around with my hands above my head, just trying to breathe deep enough. I didn't feel normal. And I was like, God, maybe I'm just like fat and out of shape, you know, like I understand, like I put on weight since my show, but then the edema set in. And I'm like, what is this? You know? And so I ended up.
You were noticing edema in your lower legs, or was it everywhere?
It started in my feet and my ankles. Yeah. But now literally it is all over my body. Well, it's not as bad today, but again, I just got out of the hospital. Yeah. And they ran me IV Lasix to get a lot of this fluid off of me and from around my heart and everywhere.
Well, that's what diuretics are actually for. Yeah. And one annoying thing about that podcast is they were like, well, doctors use higher amounts of diuretics. They use them on people with heart failure with edema, not on people that are not, you know, don't have the edema.
Right. Yeah. And I will actually say with the amount of edema that I had, they ran 20 milligrams of Lasix through my IV. And now they were doing that every 4 to 6 hours. But by the end of it, I'd taken more diuretics leading into my show than they pulled water weight off of me when I was in the hospital this last time.
Wow, fascinating.
And so they really didn't use a crazy high dose of Lasix. I've seen higher doses given in protocols. But so the first, I ended up in the hospital, not this time where I just got out, but it was like 4 or 5 days prior I went in because I felt like honestly I was having chest spasms, but they were so bad. Like I could not breathe deep enough to I wasn't getting enough air and I knew it. And I've been listening to my body. I may have been training 1, maybe 2 days a week max. And during those workouts, I felt so bad. I'm like, okay, like we're just going to take off something, you know, maybe I've got a cold. Maybe I'm working on a sinus infection. I don't know what. But it started affecting my work to the point of having trouble just getting up to the sales tower to get paperwork to then go greet a customer to take them to my office.
You'd be out of breath going.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, to the point like seeing black spots dizzy and my heart just racing out of my chest. Yeah. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I've been off everything for so long. And I ended up in the hospital the first time, and they kept me, 14-ish hours, got me stable, ran some Lasix and stuff through me. And that's whenever they were like, hey, we need you to go see a cardiologist immediately because they did more testing on me this last go than they did this time. But they're like, what we're seeing is severe mitral valve regurgitation. So the valves or whatever, how they're supposed to be like in line with your heartbeat, mine are over pumping. Is the best way I understood it. So I set up an appointment with the cardiologist and made it 2-set appointment. And now we incorporated so I'm on a
beta blocker.
Yeah, that. Yep. And those first few days on that were absolutely miserable. I felt totally out of my head.
Are you still on metoprolol, or you switched to Atenolol?
We changed it. You
feel better?
I haven't gone back on it yet, just because this is they didn't keep me on any of my meds, and they admitted me to the hospital this time. They literally took me off everything, and they're like, "We're going to monitor you and treat each symptom acutely on its own." As we, I just let them do it. But yeah, I'm going to go on the one that you recommended.
I was just for the audience to know, there's Atenolol doesn't pass the blood-brain barrier. She was feeling fatigue and some other symptoms from metoprolol. Metoprolol passes the blood-brain barrier more, so sometimes it can affect how people feel more than the hydrophilic versions. So do they say? I mean, I understand that there's a peculiarity with your valve functionality, but do they say that you're in congestive heart failure?
The only thing that they told me in the ER the first time was that there was such severe pulmonary edema surrounding my heart.
Myocardial edema, yeah. Oh, pulmonary edema. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they didn't dive any deeper than that, really. Like, the first ER I made it to, I sat for 9 hours and wasn't seen. And then had to go home.
That's something I wanted to mention to you when we spoke, is that I want you to know there are no good hospitals in Kentucky. And
I figured that out.
if you're trying to, when it comes to your heart, unfortunately, this is why sometimes in life money matters. You might have insurance that won't cover you outside of the state, but if it were me and I had a serious heart condition, I would be trying to go to a couple of hospitals like Mass General or UPMC in Pittsburgh or Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic.
Yeah. Well, see, I mean, I've got good insurance through work, and I could do all that. But my first thought, like, for instance, you're 100% right. There aren't any good hospitals in Kentucky. That hospital let me sit there 9 hours. I literally walked up, and after they told me there were still 7 patients ahead of me, I told them, I was like, listen, the edema that I'm feeling in my hands and my feet and this shortness of breath, I'm like, I have pills at my house that I can take to get rid of this, AKA I have Lasix.
Yeah.
I have everything that I could ever need, but I don't take it. And so I went home and I took Lasix. I took 40 milligram tab, and I did. I peed. I woke up and looked at my ankles, and they looked substantially better. My hands weren't as tight, but the breathing was still horrible. And that's why I went to the hospital initially, because my heart, again, is just pounding. And so they set me up with the cardiologist that first time. But this last time, so I was admitted Thursday. And when we went in, it was strange how it happened, because obviously I'm having these really bad chest pains. I got off work and immediately went, because even driving, one hit me so bad, I almost wrecked my truck.
Yeah.
And I'm just absolutely freaked out. Like, I'm on the meds. So I go to the ER. And my father worked in this ER. I went to the same one, but not the one that made me sit for 9 hours. The second one I went. And somebody that my father had worked with, because my father worked there in respiratory for 38, 39 years. He is the chief of ER. And as soon as he came in and he saw me, he's like, okay. So for starters, They immediately check CK levels, immediately check creatinine. They check for pulmonary embolisms again, because all of my medical records are right there on their computer, because I go to Norton facilities. Yeah. So then he also brings up a point, because something happened this last time that had never happened before. My body completely, while I'm sitting in the ER waiting for a doctor to come in, broke out in a hive rash all over me. Up the back of my neck. I mean, it was going up the front of my neck, and I'd never had that happen. And so he's like, okay, there's too many things wrong for us to just go ahead and handle it all here at once in the ER. You need to be admitted. But his biggest worry, they immediately gave me steroid, an antibiotic, and Benadryl. And then that hive rash, literally as quickly as it popped up, you just saw it dissipate. Yeah. And I never had that. And then they ended up admitting me on the heart, like the cardiovascular unit. Yeah. 4 is all I knew. And so that doctor comes in, and honestly, I did not have a very great experience with him, because I am transparent with doctors about what I have done, what I'm doing now as far as steroids go. Because I feel like if you take those performance enhancing drugs, you need to disclose that to doctors, because those can cause different things within you that people that don't take them won't have, or they might, but not for the same reason. So I was very upfront, very honest, like, hey, this is what I'm taking now. I'm just on 50 milligrams of testosterone. And immediately, as soon as I told this doctor that, there was a little bit of a cultural difference between us. He immediately told me that my hives and everything, the first thing he said is that it is all because of the testosterone. And I said, testosterone doesn't cause a body to break out in hives or a resting heart rate to be 163 as it was in the hospital last night.
Although I should warn you about something, that testosterone does directly raise your heart rate. Like if I were you, I would be off the testosterone. It does raise your heart rate.
Yeah, I haven't touched test. I haven't gotten over 2 weeks now.
Yeah, I was just mentioning.
Well, see, I didn't realize that would directly raise my heart rate. So see, I'm new.
Via adrenaline, yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I guess, again, all the compounds I took, I figured the Clen and
they're worse. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And so he immediately turned it into okay, so you're a recreational drug user. And I'm like, no. I'm like, this is a prescription, and really the thing I'm most worried about here is still my kidneys, because my creatinine levels were high when I went in. My CK levels weren't, though, which was good. I was glad about that. But my white blood cell count was on the high side, but the white blood cell count in my urine was high.
Interesting.
And so all these different markers were off. And they did, I mean, man, I bet they stuck me 30 different times. They've blown out every vein in my arms and hands possible.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And so, but it was weird because every time the labs would come back, as far as kidney function would go, it was like somebody's completely different, a totally different person's lab work. Right. I'm talking a whole point and a half swing in creatinine levels in a matter of 4 hours.
Interesting. Just
insane. So that's when the doctor came in, and his thought was, he's like, all the edema that is surrounding the lower part of your heart and all through your chest, he's like, I want to run Lasix through your IV. I want to get some of these fluids off of you. I want to just want to get it out. I'm like, I'm totally fine with that. He's like, I always try to make light of situations. He apparently wasn't the doctor to do that with, and I get it. But I was like, well, I actually have that same medication. I was like, normally if I've taken it, it's been in 40 milligram pills. I'm like, so I'm familiar with that. And he just looks at me and I'm like, okay. Like, he's like, how do you get these things? And I'm like, I'm just going to stop talking, like I'm done. So I let him do it, and the edema was much better. And then those chest pains stopped because they had me on a heart monitor. They did
the angina. Yeah. The chest pain is called angina. That stopped once they got the fluid out. Interesting. It
stopped once they got that fluid out. Now, it wasn't like immediate, but like I noticed over the course of time, like, I mean, when they hit, like I was like crippling forward. It hurt so bad, and it hurt all the way through. And so then, I mean, they would be less and less. And then all of a sudden they were gone. And I was like, okay, that's better. Like I can function like this. So then he brought up, well, actually I brought it up because I got a phone call from the guy who was coaching me prior to Shelby, Justin. And he was like, hey, a lot of these symptoms that you're experiencing, I want you to mention to the doctors that you want to be tested for something called FSGS, autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
And he's like, a lot of this just isn't making sense. Because I was sending him my lab work as I was getting it back. And he's like, dude, like there is something so off here. Like, I don't know what it is. He's like, 1 minute the heart looks bad. Like these numbers look deplorable. He said, then the following lab work, your kidneys are so far off. And he's like, there's so much going on.
That's what Boston has, by the way.
What is it?
Glomerulosclerosis of the kidneys.
Gotcha.
Scarring of the kidneys. Very common in bodybuilding.
Yeah. And kidneys aren't one of those things that like regenerate. You know what I'm saying? So you have to be super careful with them. And that's why this entire time I thought that it was just solely kidneys. But according to the doctors, it is because I have had this edema like so severely around my heart, apparently even when I was in prep that I didn't know about. And then this heart rate has never gotten better. They're saying that is what threw off the kidneys.
Interesting.
But I don't know what to believe, man. Yeah. I just know that they ended up doing I literally wrote this down so I could mention it to you. It was a specific test.
Now, you told me they didn't want to do an fMRI because they didn't want to challenge you with adrenaline, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So they don't really know what it looks like exactly.
Right. And so they did every piece of lab work known to man as far as my heart and my kidneys go. They did not do the kidney biopsy. I literally asked for it. I'm like, really? with these creatinine swings, like if it is an autoimmune disorder, say we've caught it early. With these crazy swings in creatinine, those numbers aren't supposed to elevate and dip that far in a matter of hours. Like maybe we could catch it before it started. You know, you've run every other test, and all they could come back with was abnormalities. And I'm like, okay. So what they did, they ran I think it's a EFR, something. It was a test where it basically measured how quickly the blood cells clotted together and dropped to the bottom of a tube. They're measuring inflammation throughout the body. I can't remember the exact name of the test. And the cardiologist said, you know, I don't anticipate this one coming back high. He said, because this is a test that shows, like, it could show if you have heart disease, kidney disease. If these inflammatory things are up, this is what's going to raise questions for us. He said, I don't anticipate these two coming back high. Well, the range on them was absolute highest 20, lowest 0. Mine came back in the 50s.
Oh, wow. Fascinating.
So, and he talked with my father, because my father came over there. He talked with us both about them, and he's like, okay. He's like, what I think, honestly, my RN was much better than the MD that was in the room with me. He wasn't worth a shit. We were just getting more confused the whole time we were there. My father's been in medicine for 40 years, and he said, I've never, he's like, I worked here. He's like, there's been nothing answered. They treated the symptoms acutely. They got me stable. They got me home. I was there for a little while, but they got me home. And then they have me now set up with specialists that I'm going to see. And honestly, my RN looked me in the face and she said, you're going to be better off and get better help going to a specialist than this guy is going to give you.
Yeah.
I was 100% like, so I do feel better. I feel much better as far as I can breathe. It doesn't feel like there's no wheeze as I'm breathing now. So that's way better. I've been having kidney pain since yesterday though.
Oh, really? Again?
Yeah. Oh God, cramping.
Well, just for the audience to know, your heart rate is still like 150 on average, right?
So this morning, whenever I woke up and just simply walked up my stairs to go check it, it was 141.
Yeah.
That's not normal.
So we don't really quite know what's going on with the heart exactly yet, right?
No.
And you know, the thing is, when it comes to specialists, I mean, your life may be in the hands of how capable that person is.
Right. And that's
diagnose it correctly and move quickly. And that's why I'm saying the Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Clinic, or maybe worth going to someone that's well reputed, even just paying cash for it, for them to diagnose you so that you know what's going on.
And actually, my family and I spoke about that after this last stint in the hospital, because being technical work-wise, I made it 2.5 days. I went into work late the day that I went to the hospital because I felt so poor when I woke up, but I still went to work. And when I left, I ended up back in the ER. And so technically I made it 2.5 days, but I'm not going to be able to hold a job that way. You know, like I'm very successful in my career, but no job is going to keep somebody on like that. And I completely understand it from a business standpoint, but there has been I feel as if going to hospitals around here have done nothing more than confuse me more, because I thought it was kidneys. Now they're telling me it's heart. And then one doctor's like, well, the kidneys could have thrown off the heart. And then the next doctor is like, well, the heart's what threw off the kidneys. I'm like, can you all give me a fucking answer?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, can we just treat it?
They don't sound like they know what they're doing, to be honest with you.
And unfortunately, this doctor, he had zero experience with bodybuilders. He literally Googled testosterone, could not pronounce enanthate, and then proceeded to tell me that he just treated me as if I was just some recreational heroin user.
Yeah, the best thing you can find is either a specialist surgeon or a PhD MD, a research physician that is very experienced in intricacies of unusual heart. I don't know if this is unusual, but those are the kind of people, you know. Have you ever seen that show Dr. House? There are people like that are specialists in cardiology and stuff like that, and they can usually see you do a few tests, 2 days, and come to a conclusion.
Figure it out.
Whereas every day that goes by with your resting heart rate like that, the damage is increasing in the heart.
Yeah. And that's why, like now, like you said, like I'm laying here in my bed, I have another doctor's note that's like, hey, you're not going back to work until you see this doctor, who is then probably going to want to put you off longer until this specialist gets their hands on you. How am I supposed to live normally?
That's the thing about life. You know, money doesn't matter for much except health. When your health gets hit, that's the reason everyone listening to this should save money. It's just shocking.
Yeah. And that's why initially when I came out to speak on it, you know, as athletes, we can all say, you hear horror stories, you know, there are good coaches, there are bad coaches, there are good athletes, there are bad athletes. And that's why I wasn't initially putting it out there like, oh, Shelby STARNES did this to me. I still don't feel that way. You know, I as an athlete knew what my body was going through. And now I did voice it to my coach. You know, I did the right thing. And we would take off here and don't do this there. And it was just trying to hold me. And at that point, it made me feel like he cared, you know, but I mean, we still pushed it. But I knew the possibilities of what could have happened to me. But I will say this, I never once imagined that everything going on with me was a possibility. And
I don't think many people do, really. No. Like, for example, we had
thrown off.
Yeah. I mean, like, for example, let's talk about that video those people made. I mean, one of the things, I just had a chance to watch it real quick while I was waiting for you. And there were some things that they said. First of all, I have to say something. So there's a lady named Michaela. It was alleged that she died, that she was a client of Shelby's and she died from suicide, but as a client of his. He's disputing this fact. And many people sent me messages saying Michaela was never his client. So anyway, the only reason Michaela was mentioned was it was alleged that she had worked for him. I never knew for sure. I never said she did work with him. And so we have to correct that. But other than that, well, you know what's a pretty interesting thing? Apparently Shelby, when he was coaching people, was coached by Dave Palumbo at the same time, which I find to be a fascinating thing. Palumbo has an arrhythmia. He also has a stint in his heart. He has a lot of heart issues. And he's also the person that recommends a lot of Clen and T3 to people. He's notorious for that. I don't know if he influenced Shelby to do that. They said something about Stephanie that I didn't like. They said apparently her ex-boyfriend came out, said she was using hedonistic drugs. I want to be clear about something. Her report, why it was important for us, was because she described the protocol. It doesn't matter what happened to her, because she didn't die. We weren't talking about that. We were talking about the fact that the protocol is a death recipe. And my point of it really was the Clen and T3. I wasn't even thinking too much about the diuretic stuff, which is also a bit crazy. But the Clen and T3, we're talking about like over 100 micrograms of T3, over 100 micrograms of Clen. Even if somebody doesn't have heart problems, that's going to damage your heart acutely. You know, so that's why we talked about that. Talking about someone's hedonistic drug use is a character assassination that has nothing to do with what they were talking about, because her complaint wasn't just how bad she felt. It was, hey, this is the protocol. And anyone in their right mind that looks at that sees that could damage someone really seriously. But they also said, they said we focus too much on the diuretics. Again, I was focused on the T3 and Clen personally. It was over 200 micrograms, by the way. I'm just downplaying it. Yeah. They also said, higher doses of diuretics are used by medical professionals. They're used on people with edema, not people with normal water content.
No. They won't touch you unless you have severe pulmonary edema at that.
Or myocardial edema, which is what 100%. You also had.
And even then, with me, they pulled like 24 pounds of water off of me.
Wow.
And that was done with 20 milligrams of Lasix, less than the pills that I've had on hand for years.
But it was IV, right?
It was IV, yes.
Yeah, so that's a bit different.
It's going to work, yeah.
Yeah, they also said this thing about you, why would she follow the protocol if she didn't think it was, I mean, people, yeah, everyone has responsibility, and Jodie never just went and blamed him as being a sole cause, but the fact of the matter is no bodybuilding client knows much about heart health or kidney health, and neither do the coaches, and it's evidenced in their discussion. They made a bunch of mistakes. Like one of those guys was talking about Michaela's suicide and saying, well, the letrozole couldn't as a single drug make someone depressed enough to commit suicide, and that's not true. And second of all, that person said letrozole affects dopamine. It's not dopamine, it's serotonin. They should pay attention when they're trying to correct things from other people. I mean, you're talking about three guys. The guy on the left was good, but the other two guys making mistakes left and right while they're trying to correct things. You know, it just shows if these two coaches don't even know what dopamine or serotonin are. So for them, they also said that no protocol could kill somebody in 3 weeks unless it was diuretics, and that's not true. Clenbuterol and T3 could easily throw an arrhythmia or kill somebody in 3 weeks. I think that covers most of it. I mean,
it was horrible. I understand a lot of those guys are friends with Shelby, and now I've been in contact with Shelby. Shelby reached out to me when I was in the hospital to check in on me and see how I was doing, you know, and Shelby knows how I feel on this. Yeah. He
doesn't seem to be an evil guy. I don't get that impression. I get them.
I never once saw him as an evil guy. Yeah. Even when I read that insane diuretic protocol, that I own it. I laughed at it and said, if this doesn't kill me, I'll be shocked. Because I knew reading it how fucking extreme it was. But I also knew at that point, just like any other athlete that has made it that long in prep, no deviations, follow the plan 100%. There's nothing that's going to get you to come off plan because I want to win.
And beyond that, if it's the top coach in the industry and you see the plan, you think, okay, this is what it took other people to get there. So this is what I got to do.
100%. That's what I thought. I'm like, I guess this is what it takes to be a pro. I was like, ready or not, here we go. Exactly. You know? And so I just want it to be known that I never once blamed Shelby. And most importantly, Shelby knows that. And Shelby said to me, he's like, all I ever wanted was the best for you. And I said, I know that 100%. I said, we could not, neither of us can predict the future. You know, all I can do now is.
Well, no, that's not completely true because sorry, I just want to add a caveat. I'm not a bodybuilder and I don't know much about this stuff, but so they were saying something like, hey, say if you have 400 clients or whatever, they didn't mention the number, but if you have a lot of clients, you give them a protocol. It's the responsibility of the client to know if this is good for their health or not. That's like, for example, there are little things you could do. So for example, not just blood work before we get started, but you could do an fMRI scan of the heart and the kidneys, and you could quickly know if the person has normal functioning heart, normal functioning kidneys. Now, maybe a client will refuse to do that, but you could ask for that. You could also ask, for example, I mean, this is very common. You could ask the client to have an Apple Watch or have a Oura Ring and know their heart rate, and so you could start to see, hey, the heart rate's elevated all the time. Wait a minute, something's going on here. I need to back off. But if you're not getting that information from the biomarkers, then what, you know, is it the coach's responsibility? Maybe not, but he could have done something more, you know, but you can't do that if you have 400 clients.
I get that 100%. And I have no idea how he coaches as many people as he coaches, and he gets back to you as quickly as he does, you know? So, I mean, maybe at that point you do miss things. Nobody is perfect. I'm not perfect. We've all made our fair share of mistakes, but my whole sole purpose for wanting to speak on it is not to defame Shelby STARNES. I love Shelby. I don't solely blame him for what happened to me at all. I take as much responsibility as needs to be put on me as the athlete. So these guys in this podcast saying it should be on the athlete, you're right, it should. A part of it should be, but another part still needs to be owned by the person that wrote the protocol.
Well, not only that, coaches can learn from this experience and say, 100%. Hey, maybe they do need to watch the heart rate. Maybe they do need to request ultrasounds of the kidney, or
exactly, or just the labs at the beginning. You know,
Well, they don't even, the sad thing is they don't even know which biomarkers to study. So for example, you've been mentioning creatinine constantly. You never mentioned C or symmetric dimethylarginine, which are, to triangulate, to know if the kidney's functioning well, you need a couple of biomarkers that are not influenced by muscle mass. Some of the coaches know about C. I've never heard a bodybuilding coach mention symmetric dimethylarginine, which is another one you could use. They usually don't know much about biomarkers. So they read metabolic, just a standard metabolic panel, which doesn't tell them that much. Most of these guys have never even done an ultrasound on their own kidneys. Most of them don't even know the word glomerulosclerosis, the scar tissue buildup in the kidney. So the good thing about what you're doing, I mean, the great thing is hopefully people see this and realize this is a possibility.
Yeah.
It's a possibility. It's not, because we've had one other gentleman on the show, Mike Wheels, who was coached by Milos Sarshev and ended up with ejection. By the way, do you know your ejection fraction?
I believe it said 45 on my paperwork.
Okay, it's not so bad.
Because I remember you mentioning that, and I looked it up, and I believe it said ejection fraction was 45%.
So he ended up with heart failure, and he's hoping he can recover. But that happens more often than people realize. There's actually a lot of people with heart failure in bodybuilding.
And I think that's where, if your coach isn't asking you, obviously you don't know what to look for, and I've had plenty of girls message me. I have been inundated with messages, and I haven't even been on the train as hard as, some other athletes have been on this. One, because of health, obviously, I'm either sleeping or in the hospital. But two, like, I've had women messaging me like, hey, Shelby's my coach. Like, what do you think I need to do? And I'm like, listen, my piece of advice to anyone, I don't care if Shelby is your coach, Shane Hughley is your coach, whoever the fuck your coach is. If something feels off, if you feel bad, you as an athlete 100% need to disclose that. Or if you feel some type of way about it, you 100% need to disclose that. If your coach disregards what you say and says this is the only way, that is where there's a problem. Just do your due diligence in knowing what the ugly side of this looks like. And right now, I went from what I thought was the most insane look I've ever had to now living in a body that I don't know what this body is. It's a completely different, it's a totally different system is what it feels like. And I'm lucky though. I'm lucky.
Yeah, that's true.
My cardiologist said with what you did, you should have died backstage. You shouldn't even have made it to the stage. You're lucky. And I'm like, well, I am. It sucks, but I knew the possibilities of it. I just never seen anybody with it, and now I'm somebody with it.
Well, hopefully, God willing, you'll be able to recover. Hopefully, God willing, you'll find a cardiologist that's good at diagnostics and can really discover exactly what's going on before they cut you. Because, by the way, I don't know if you know this, you can ask your dad, but there's a lot of unnecessary surgeries that happen. Doctors think something's wrong, go inside, realize it's not. They wasted their time. You have a major trauma. And this, but let's mention also, maybe this is too much, but if I was a bodybuilder that wanted to compete, I would, before I start, go to my cardiologist, and this is what I would honestly do. I would tell him, my mom's side, all have heart disease. They died young. I'm scared to have heart disease. Now you have the family history, so the doctor could put on your insurance. I want an fMRI scan of my heart. The proper fMRI scan. I want to know what it looks like. And then I would also mention, maybe I don't know how you could, it's hard, but the other side of my family has kidney disease. I'd like to get an ultrasound of my kidneys. So before you start, you have an idea. Do I have anything going on there? And then maybe throughout, I would have an Apple Watch, maybe an Oura Ring, so I can see my heart rate when it changes. And then just like you said, if you feel something's wrong, go, tell your coach, but maybe go to your doctor directly.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many bodybuilders, including Boston, and even me when I was an arm wrestler, sometimes I felt like I was dying. I felt a feeling like, what, this is wrong. Something is wrong in my body. When you feel that,
more now since I've competed. I mean, I haven't had one normal day. And so it's like, wow, how the doctor put it to me this time, he said, I think at some point, once we figure out exactly which set the other off, you will get back to a state of normalcy. He said, but your normalcy will be abnormal, but it will also be livable. So even my normal is going to be abnormal for me. But dude, I don't care. Like,
although to be honest, I don't think those doctors are really the best. So like, hold your hopes out. Hold your hopes out.
Now the kidney doctor I spoke to there was fantastic, but the kidney doctor couldn't do anything without the cardiovascular doctor approving it, because the biggest worry was my heart, because the whole time my heart rate was through the roof and blood pressure high. And so, so the kidney specialist basically was like, I need you to go to this doctor here to then get sent to me specifically. And so it's just a fucking game of bounce around.
Yeah, and because of responsibility, they're all concerned about their liabilities and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so I'm gonna see this kidney doctor through, because he was great. He was very good. He even told me, he's like, I want to test you for this. He said, but now the markers aren't within the range, although 4 hours ago they were 1.5 points higher. And I'm also telling you, it is very abnormal that your creatinine tanked 1.5 points in 4 hours. So I recognize why we need to test for this, but now I can't, because I cannot send in the order for the test.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. So,
well, Jodie, I think
straight on a lot of things.
By the way, I can see even while you're talking to me, your heart rate seems to get elevated. Sometimes you lose your breath, right?
I do, and you'll actually notice it throughout my face too. My nose will get red, and I'll get red up around my forehead and everywhere.
Yeah, I see that. Well, Jodie, I thank you I want the audience to understand, Jodie doesn't benefit in any kind of way from talking about this. All she can do is try to help others, literally help somebody else not fall into a situation. She does it out of the kindness of her heart. So I really appreciate it, Jodie. I applaud your self-sacrifice, because to be honest, when someone gets a health problem, especially, that you could feel like it's somehow part of my own doing, a lot of people don't want to talk about it. They'd rather just stay quiet. It suits you better that way, so you don't get any antagonism or whatever. But
I'll get pure hate for coming on here with you, and I don't care, because at the end of the day, I just wanted to set it straight. Like, I own what I did. I'd heard the potentials. I still went after it. Should I have done things differently? Yes. I also feel as if my coach should have done things differently, but because neither of us did. Yes. So at the end of the day, I'm reaping the
yeah, I forgot that phrase. What is that phrase? Reaping the oats you sowed or something?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, that's a Kentucky phrase, if there ever was one.
100%. And then I got it and I lost it. But no, I'm just now proof of what can happen when you do something way too extreme that you're like, oh, it's never going to happen to me. I said it. There's no way that can happen. Want to bet? Yeah.
Exactly. And the scarier part is it's similar things happen to a lot of people that don't even know it happened. And then they die at 50 or late 40s. And that's where a lot of bodybuilding deaths come from. The damage is real. It happens. You might not see it. And you might not see it on regular blood panels too. Yeah. Anyway, Jodie, thank you so much. I'm gonna end it here, but I'll post this soon. Yeah. I'll try to make the title somehow exciting so people click on it. By the way, that's the reason, for the audience to know, the reason why the last one is called The Death Guru was to get the video attention. It's not actually to shame. It's because there's no way to get, it's important for people to see it. And then on YouTube, your title does everything. So that's the reason why that happened. Yep. Anyway, thank you so much, Jodie. It was a pleasure to speak to you. I'm going to continue talking to you privately.
All right. Look forward to it.
All right. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.